Good afternoon and good morning in some parts of the world. I know we've got a lot of students and potential students that are joining us. So I welcome my class, our class that's going through and actually now finished the lectures. It ran from Jan to June. And we've got another class that starts in July. And I've got a large number of incoming students that will be on the call or listening to this after the fact. We are going to record this, so everybody will get this in the next couple of days. And I'll introduce a number of folks that are with me today. In the background, I've got Jason, who is one of our key individuals as far as helping orchestrate and make this work. So welcome to everybody. It's great to have everybody here. And again, I think we'll get started. So I first of all wanted to, of course, acknowledge where we are. I want to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today. And while we meet on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the effect of residential schools and colonialism on Indigenous families and communities, and to consider how we are and can each, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. And I'd also like to recognize June as National Indigenous Month in Canada. So we are here talking about the Certificate in Professional Impact Analysis. Specifically today, I've invited all of you and delighted that so many of you have joined us. We're going to have a fireside chat. And the fireside chat is with a Chief Impact Officer. And I know that I promised that to the class that's in now. I've had a lot of discussions about the class, those individuals that are coming in July. We welcome anybody. I know there's some that are listening to this, really trying to understand, is this the right program for me? And hopefully this will anchor that and let you know that we've got a tremendous program that we'd love you to be a part of, which starts in mid-July. So again, here we sit today, and we're pretty excited about it. My name's Glenn Hollis. Many of you know me. I'm the Program Director for the CPIA. I work with the Center for Entrepreneurship, Innovation, and Social Impact, which is part of the Queen's Business School, Smith School of Business. And I'm delighted that we've got this program with us today. So this is the only program that measures good. And again, I know that's a lofty ambition, and it certainly is true, as you'll understand through the program. Our mission very clearly is enabling leaders like you to measure good. And the whole purpose of this is to do more good. The more you can measure, the more you can understand. Is it moving the needle? Is it doing good? Can we do more good? And there's no sin in doing well and doing good for all my for-profit friends that are out there. So this is very much a blend of not-for-profit, for-profit, NGO, government on all three levels. We've got students right across the board in the program, and we're delighted that they're in the program. So the faculty with this program, Dr. Bauman Kashi, Dr. Chris Cotton, and Dr. Elspeth Murray. Dr. Cotton and Dr. Kashi join me today, and I'm delighted that you're on this call. Elspeth is traveling outside of the country and would have loved to have joined, but unfortunately just didn't line up with her calendar. So I'd love you to stay on camera if you can, or come on camera, everybody. We'd love to see your faces. And also stay on mute at this point. We're going to open up for Q&A shortly. But I'm delighted that we've got our fireside chat. This is loose. This is meant to be relaxed. It's meant to be enjoyable. And our Chief Impact Officer that joins us today, Louise Kent. Louise is the Chief Impact Officer and partner at Mighty Hum. And you're going to hear a lot about that. And I'd encourage you all to go to the website. It's a tremendous website with some great customer client testimonials that really, understand this idea of humble beginnings and where organizations with a good sense of purpose might go. The thing that struck me as I spoke more and more with Louise, and I'll let her introduce herself shortly, was this a sense of purpose that they had within their own organization. You'll hear a lot about Mighty Hum. You'll hear about Louise's journey to the CIO chair. but this idea of helping purpose-driven organizations grow their impact for a better world. That aligns with what we're trying to do with this program. And we're delighted that we've got chief impact officers, and this is a growing role. We'll talk about that. But I'm delighted that Louise joins us today. And again, her MBA, even though it's not from Queens, mind you, neither is mine. I'm from Schulich, but we're delighted that she's here. She has her MBA from Ivy, and that's okay too. But again, welcome to Louise. I'm going to unshare my slides. I'm going to allow you a minute of transition to share your slides. And again, it's just delightful that you're here, and we certainly appreciate that.
Thanks so much, Glenn. I don't have any slides for the first bit, everybody. Um, so I'll just go for it then. Hey, Glenn, all good? Awesome. Okay, so first of all, I've been part of these conversations as a prospective student, and I just want to say I really hope this is practical and applicable and relevant and interesting and engaging. So just yeah, we'll have a ton of time for Q&A at the end. I'll share, I don't know, 5, 7, 9 minutes about my journey, and then I'll share my slides with you about the organization I'm at right now, Mighty Hum, and my role there. Professor Bauman also asked us to share like a case study. So I have like an actual business that we're working with right now, and just kind of some of the stuff we're doing with them. And then finally, a little bit about the specific aspects of my role to finish off. And then I'll throw it over to Professor Bowman and Glenn. Awesome. Okay, so just like anyone else, I started with my degree, which was a BA in International Development and Environmental Studies. Part of that degree, I ended up studying in rural Kenya. I camped in a tent and with professors and international kind of students, and we traveled around the countryside from, the southern area of the Sahara to the Kakamega rainforest to the savanna to the coastal regions, really to meet with communities, understand what issues they were dealing with, and the natural environment and how development and how the world was changing, globalization, et cetera, was influencing their prosperity and the planet. After I graduated, I wanted to kind of go right into development work. I really felt like quite connected. It wasn't just data, these were lives. I got to know people. And so I went down to Guyana, where I spent the better part of a year through a CEDA internship, which is Canadian International Development Agency, which I'm sure everybody here knows. And I did some needs assessments and community development work, mostly kind of small D development. So very grassroots, very youth oriented. And when I got back from that, I threw on a backpack, as one does in their early 20s, and I traveled around Southeast Asia and spent several months in rural China trying to get into Tibet. But, I just couldn't convince anybody to let me over that border at that time. But it was, again, a real reminder. There's a point to me sharing all of this because impact isn't just about numbers. And so when I was touring around, when I'm saying touring, I'm like literally on buses and sleeper trains and stuff, and a broken backpack, learning and meeting people who were part of the many diverse ethnic groups in rural China, which you don't hear about. So, the world is a beautiful, diverse place with lots and lots of folks and communities who don't always get attention where maybe it's due. When I came back to Canada, I started my first like real job. I started with a charity that was focused on child labor. And that was something I cared a lot about. I saw a lot of kids working on my travels. And that organization was Free the Children. You might know them as We Charity. So I spent 9 years working on the charity side, so raising funds for the development work, essentially building schools, clean water systems beside those schools so girls didn't have to go to a dirty river to collect water, but rather to school and fetched clean water to bring home. So culturally, with all the various barriers, they were able to get an education, health services, and also alternative sources of income for women that might look like a small farm or a small like goats or whatnot. So kind of a really interesting way for women to be more economically independent. And then on the Me to We side, I worked on the social enterprise as well. So that was the social enterprise that gave 50% of its profits back to the charity so that it wouldn't be so reliant on donations, especially straight toward the administration fee. And that's how they kept their admin fee low. And if you know anything about the charitable industry, it's like keep that admin rate low and people will give more to you, which is completely unsustainable. And I don't agree with, but there you go. Um, so I was a speaker for on the social enterprise side, a speaker coach, and then I led trips. So I went to Kenya and Ecuador and India and all these places to show high school students kind of what I received in my university degree and afterwards some connection to the human beings who are in these communities who deserve support or independence and autonomy. Um, after this state of my kind of this section of my life is really where I got into impact. I became the impact investor, the director of impact investing for Royal York Capital. And I started as a very small contract, but when I started speaking with the head of this business, um, he said, let's work together for 2 years. I want to teach you about investing, and he was a very successful private investor. And he wanted to apply his principles of investing to the philanthropic world. So that just really looked like high return on invested capital, patient capital. He was an activist investor. So how do we understand that? How do we apply that to risk capital and do projects that maybe wouldn't have been funded otherwise, but could connect with real material value? And really, this is where I started learning the power of finance to illustrate value. Um, Sadly, last week I attended a funeral for a 19-year-old who passed away recently, and Scotty Barnes showed up at his hospital room in his last week, and him and his brothers were like big basketball fans. And Scotty sat there, and if you know basketball, this is like a pretty big deal. Raptor, he like gave him a signed first jersey, like that is impact and you can't quantify it. And there's going to be that impact, and it's all around the world. It's in every moment of every day. And we have to recognize that that is true impact. But this was different. And so understanding that there is that impact. And there's also systemic impact that is alleviating large scale problems where we know where the levers are to pull. And if we are to pull or intervene at key milestones, then we can quantify what that value is. And after spending some time at this company, I recognized speaking about, return on invested capital, IRR, net present value, all this kind of thing, social return on investment. This is ways that they understand. Um, and so whether it's a high net worth individual, a family foundation, or, institutional investors, if you're able to quantify it and back it up with forecasts or whatnot, then you might be able to have a better chance at raising capital for an intervention, whether it's a business intervention or nonprofit, it doesn't matter. It's about the value of that intervention. So after our 2 years together, it kind of ended, and I shifted to actually one of our investments to work with Leap. And Leap is a venture philanthropy organization. If you are from Toronto, you may have heard of it. They do work across the country, but they're basically in Toronto, and their mandate is to find the highest impact charities that are available. And this is the quantifiable type of impact that have scalable solutions. And so my job there was to do the due diligence and fill that pipeline filled with incredible interventions from across Canada that could be scaled 10x over 5 years by rallying private sector support, whether it's media, strategy, government relations. All of these private sector partners would come and donate pro bono services. So each charity investment would receive over $1 million in pro bono services over their time with us. I moved from the due diligence side and presenting to the board of directors to find which ones are we going to invest in into the portfolio director side. So working with each of these actual charities to rally support. How are we going to make this growth plan work? The charity itself was like LEAP is incubated at Boston Consulting Group downtown Toronto, so that's where I worked out of, and they would develop the strategies, and then my job was to figure out which organization do we need at which time to unlock this growth strategy. It was a somewhat flawed model, but I loved it. Um, yeah, so that at that point, that's when I joined Ivy, not Queens. But all the same, it worked out for me at the time. And my life was changing. I had two young kids, so I was recruited by Girl Guides of Canada at that time. And I thought, oh yeah, Girl Guides, this is kind of a safe, kind of chill. I know what to expect. But I will say that this is when I recognized the need for change management in impact. Impact, when we talk about impact and making a positive difference in people's lives or in communities or for the planet, it really requires a lot of behavior change and people changing stuff that they do and they're comfortable with. With Girl Guides, you think Girl Guides, yay, I'm like rehashing a whole program. I had to make it digitally accessible, relevant, technologically kind of accessible and evergreen. But that's not the way this organization was. And so 20,000 women are part of this incredible movement community. And yet here we were asking them to change quite a bit. So it was at that time that I got my change management practitioner certification. And I will say that that was a really massive learning for me, and the need for strong change management whenever we're looking at implementing change, implementing impact. So from here, I am going to do what I did before and share my screen and share. And I'm going to kind of introduce you to the organization that I'm part of right now, which is Mighty Hum. Glenn, can you give me a thumbs up if I'm in presenter mode?
You're not in presenter mode, but I can see your screen. You're in presenter mode.
Okay,
Now.
cool. Awesome. Okay, so this is where I landed. This is where I am now. I started to consult with this kind of impact enterprise that hated to call themselves consultants, called Mighty Hum. And the missions there, we unlock positive impact through client success. This is like the roster of folks who are part of the Mighty Hum team. But we have so many other contractors who work with us who actually I'm noticing aren't even on this slide. There's only a few full-time staff and everybody else comes in and out as needed. About the organization, just to give you an idea of the types of things that the consultancy does. So designing and scaling high impact ventures. So really looking at impact, but not just impact like what I think of as impact, but business models, financial clarity, growth strategies, just efficient and effective business fundamentals. Then we also work with big visionaries that don't really know what they want, but they really understand like the outcome they want to see. So we help to translate vision into execution. So there's a lot of roadmap building and implementation plans so that they can scale with confidence. revenue and market traction. So these are also just fundamentals: sales, pricing, business development, profitability. If you're a business and you're trying to do good in the world, if you're not profitable, it can't really be a sustainable business model if you're not making a living wage for yourself or your staff. So there's a lot of stuff that we do in this realm. Equipping leaders, so mastering operational and financial excellence. So this is really about coaching executives, coaching leadership teams, getting rituals in place to really make sure that organization is humming, as we like to say. Building strategic partnerships and ecosystems. We're big on ecosystem building. We're big on connecting dots and, oh, you should meet this person, because that's really where you see some really exciting stuff happen. And then this is kind of where I come in, maximizing and measuring project impact. So whether that's on people, planet, and prosperity, or all three. And then I'll get into a little bit what I mean about that in a sec. We work with all sorts of clients, both nonprofit and for-profit. And we really, when we're thinking about impact and my role, just to kind of get into that now, we really unlock impact in one of two ways. I don't know if they're mutually exclusive, but generally our clientele would be a purpose-driven organization, and we're helping them find the hum. So enterprise-wide solutions, enterprise-wide help so that they can have stronger exec teams, strengthen resilience. And by that, I mean they have more revenue channels than potentially just government grants or one type of donation. They have growth strategies. We're talking about profitability or how they're communicating their impact to drive more funding, operational improvements. Or we have clients who are traditional corporations, and this is one of them that I have the case for in a sec. And we're helping them create and measure impact. So that could look like a theory of change or a logic model, which generally businesses don't do, and I don't understand why. Impact assessment, so I put a social return on investment here, but really we would do those on either side if that's something that they wanted to measure and communicate. Metrics and measurement. So a lot of folks, they measure the bottom line, they measure productivity, they measure profitability, but they're not always measuring certain things that might be contributing to that upstream. So those are the types of things that I'll speak to in the case in a sec. Compliance, there's a whole lot of compliance, especially in a globalized market, that we need to be thinking about. And my favorite, change management. So, Chief Impact Officer, when I came in, they had never had a Chief Impact Officer before, but they were an impact enterprise. And yet we didn't have a framework. How are we telling this impact story? And so I had a lot of different options that I presented to the team, but essentially I advise that we go for the simplest one possible. We're a small but mighty team, and people, planet, and prosperity, nice and simple. The SDGs, everybody knows the global goals, and they have indicators and targets that are actually specific to each one of those goals. So we really wanted to take something off the shelf. We did not want to customize anything. And this is a really lovely way to speak to the categories of impact that we're helping our clients unpack. When we look at, I'm just looking, we don't have health under people, but we've just signed on a client who is an amazing mental health organization, a business. And so I'll have to add that in there. Additional to this, we have lots of different spreadsheets with each indicator and which client and communicating to that client. And I can go through that later if you want. When we look at prosperity, though, that number 8, that decent work, that's where I want to draw us for just a small example of one of the clients that we work with. So Roses is a manufacturing company in the United States in the South. They were having, their challenge was they had ineffective onboarding practices. They struggled with high turnover rates, recruitment difficulties, and they were unable to attract and retain talented employees, especially women. So they had a third party come in and kind of say, you're the women representing the women, the number of women you have on your teams at various teams, especially in the leadership team, was lower than ideal. And so they wanted to kind of get to the bottom of this. And so the example of I led this project, and so the example of what we did here was we did a discovery phase with them. We started with a virtual assessment, which was essentially a survey that was translated into Spanish as well. And we also went down into and sat with folks, did focus groups to really understand what's the why here? Why are these things happening? And there were things that were not related to human capital, but the majority of the issues they were having were related to human capital inefficiencies or issues. We did a retention plan. So that plan had many different strategic channels. One was the visibility. They're a family business and they really love the fact they're a family business, and so do their employees, we found out. But they don't really know the leaders. The staff weren't really connected to the folks at the top, to the family. And so that was one of the strategies, be visible. The second one, and these are just not all of them, the communication channel. So if someone wasn't going to come to work, there was no real way efficiently to say, I'm not coming in. So people were not coming in, but the managers weren't able to see that or to understand that. So they were having shifts go unmanned or womaned, as is the case. Recruitment, they were looking for specific profiles of someone who had been in this industry for a really long time. Thus, they were ruling out a lot of women who had the problem solving and technical capabilities. It's not rocket science, and a willingness to learn, but they were ruling them out because of some of their profile settings on the recruitment side of things. So, and then onboarding, they just needed some support. So one of our amazing, amazing team members, she came on and she's a CHRO, and she helped to implement all of these, not all, but a lot of these strategies. At the same time, we applied change management to all of these projects. When you're layering so many things to do, or tactics or activity sets, you really want to know at this stage, you need to be doing X, Y, Z to support the success of future activity streams. But all this said, we've already seen a 16% increase in productivity. I did not put the metrics for turnover reduced because I'm still waiting on the raw data. This is one of those things, they're busy and I want to crunch that data on my own. It's not very much time, but it's very important to me. And maybe, as you can see with a consultant, you have to give you have to give it over to the company, and the company may or may not feel the same in terms of the priority it's placing. And they have to fill their night shift, or someone just got fired. So they have other competing priorities. Last but not least, my role. I was going to just share my job description, but it's not as clean as this, so I just decided to put some bullets up. So I think there's like 7 bullets, and then I'll stop sharing and we can get into the Q&A. So the first thing is that framework, developing and executing a comprehensive impact strategy. This is my job. I'm applying the frameworks. I'm saying, where different clients, this kind of going into number 3, actually, where different clients are playing in terms of the various indicators that we've set. Impact measurement and reporting, I mean, it's just measuring what we say we're going to do. And the second bullet in that second one there is I'm really hoping we can do an impact report this year. We've never done one before. And of course, this isn't our impact, it's our client impact. So it will be likely in Well, it'll definitely need client permission, but it'll also be a more narrative format with as many statistics as we can get. Thought leadership. This is something that I'm going to be embarking on in the next couple months. Very excited to share tools and learnings with the broader industry. Stakeholder engagement and business development. This is the same across the board, so I'm not going to need to go into this. Everybody needs to engage with folks and also, drum up new business. Mine is in the environmental side. I wish we had more environmental, clean tech, climate related clients. And so that's where I'm focused. Risk mitigation and compliance. Again, globalized world, so many frameworks, so much to comply with. So we really need to stay on top of that for our clients and for ourselves. And budget oversight and resource allocation. So one of those things would be, the types of conferences and thought leadership that we're going to, but also like we are just finalizing B Corp. We are at 1% for the planet, part of that kind of world. And so it is a small budget, but we do need to be thoughtful about how we're spending our funds. And that's it. Um, so Glenn,
Yeah.
Professor Bauman, go for it.
Excellent, excellent. Again, I love to see the dedicated role and the growth of this space, for all the reasons you just identified. I'm going to ask Dr. Kashi just to thoughts and comments around this, the program, connecting the dots, etc. And I'd invite anybody and everybody to throw any Q&A in there. And Warren and Ben from my MBA class, I know you guys aren't shy. But again, over to you, Dr. Kashi, if you could.
Thanks, Glenn, and thanks, Louise, for this great presentation. Can you hear me fine? Is the audio video working? Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for that. I think we have a mix of participants in this session, where some are people who have gone through the CPIA program and some who are interested are signed up to join the CPIA's next cohort, if I understand it correctly. So what I thought would be helpful is to acknowledge that and make sure that the conversation appreciates that difference. One of the things that we advocate for in the CPIA program is that the professionals in this area need to have a very broad understanding of impact and all the different pathways for impact. So this presentation is amazing because it kind of brings you into the way it gets eventually applied, especially with the example that Luis provided, looking at how in the for-profit space a view on impact can come to be materialized. And something that those who have gone through the CPIA program, they some of the things they would sort of pick would be that an impact measurement framework like the SDGs can be applied when you're looking at operationalizing an impact framework for an organization, right? Or it can help actually translate the values of the organization when you're thinking about picking those indicators, etc. The other thing that I would actually invite Luis to also comment on is that a nuance that is critical and the role of CIO would have to bring in is that it is one thing to sort of do the analysis around impact and identifying opportunities for increasing or creating impact. It's another thing to think about what gets communicated. So in the process of looking at the impact areas, identifying things to do, it is not that the rest of the SDGs or pathways for impact, whatever framework you're using, it's not that the rest are ignored, because there are so many of them, right? And you might pick a subset for communication or impact, or even like categorizing your framework. But it's more that when you're thinking about opportunities for change, you don't want to be ignoring like other things that are important for people, but might not be in your categories. So you don't end up in a situation where you're not paying attention to those other important things. It's that like I think the example that I remember, there was an impact investment fund that we were chatting with, and they had these different pathways for impact, and gender equity was a big one for them. But then someone said, "Oh, but that organization is in the business of hunting in like in areas that are disputed in terms of like whether or not you should be hunting in here. So we don't want to go there, but we don't have that sort of environmental protection as one of the areas in our list of impact pathways." And they were adding a lot of these sort of footnotes. But I think the bottom line is, because communication is such a big aspect of it, you can't always communicate all aspects of impact necessarily, but it doesn't mean that you can ignore them. So anyway, I just wanted to sort of bring that together as the CPIA program tries to sort of ensure that the impact officers of the future have that comprehensive look. But then when it comes to like creating an impact framework, communicating out of it, your hands are tied because you can just communicate so much, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be ignoring those behind the scenes. That's the only thing I wanted to sort of add here. I also wanted to highlight that Chris, who's another faculty member of the program, is also on the call. I don't know if Chris, I don't want to put Chris on the spot, but if Chris wanted to add anything before we also pass it back to Louise, then we can. I just did put Chris on the spot, but anyway, thanks again.
Thanks, Bob, and I'll leave it at I'll pass it back to the group to start with, as I have a little bit of noise in the background right now, but I may chime in with a question in a couple of minutes.
Great. We've got a few questions already in the hopper. Let's just take a look at that. And I know one of them was around, you can see it, Louise, your change management training and such, some interest in that. Where'd you do that?
Yeah, I think someone had mentioned ProSci. That was where I got it. It is it has been incredibly impactful framework for me. It's very formulaic, and it's been quite helpful. The other thing that I just did a couple years ago was the Sustainability and Climate Risk Certificate, which was through GARP, which is the Association for Risk Professionals, and that was a slog, but that was if you're into climate specifically, not the whole impact that this program would give you, but just specifically on climate and risk there from a risk management perspective. That was really helpful. And I just want to add one thing, which was for the case from the roses that I used. A lot of people might be like, that's not impact. Like, what are you doing? But actually, it was one of the results that isn't there is the number of women who have actually been recruited now and are being employed, and they tend to be retained longer. So we'll watch that in the coming years. But I just recognized that wasn't even on there.
You got a
Any
question
other
from
questions?
Margaret there? Yep. What would your suggestion to companies that are just starting out that want to provide impact for their communities?
Margaret, can you explain a bit? Companies that are just starting out this role, or starting out just.
So I work with a lot of companies that they're just starting out. They're building up. And the reason that they're building up is that there's been something that has impacted their lives that they want to contribute back to their community. What would be your suggestion? Because, when you're just starting out as a company, there's not as much funds, right? But you can still impact by volunteering, by, making awareness, that sort of thing. What would be your suggestion?
Yeah, there's so many ways. I would say two things. First of all is, do you want it to be business related? So if you're a paper company, do you want to have some sort of environmental slant because of you're using the material, so you're just kind of by way of your business, you're doing it more responsibly. and the social impact that you make or the impact that you make is kind of business relevant? Or is it kind of personally relevant, which we also see, leadership teams in some random business will say, we really care about sports for kids. Well, then it's totally cool either way. But that needs to be I think the business, the leads need to really agree to that and make sure that the whole company is kind of behind them because I'm guessing they're a small company, small business. And yeah, I love that idea when you don't have funds to make a volunteer day and to do awareness raising. Those are all very important. And every business has a platform with it, whether it's LinkedIn or their customer base, and using their community involvement as part of their core values, who they are, kind of their values as a company can also help them in their business because a lot of people are looking for that in the businesses they support and buy from.
Right.
Hopefully that was helpful. I mean, that's just my perspective. If anybody else has any others.
I'm going to ask Cindy to come off and come off mute. Cindy and I were just talking yesterday about the Genome Project. Chris,
Oh,
yeah, and Chris, you had that as one of your case studies threaded through the capstone on Friday in the course. And our class that's listening now will know that. So, Cindy, ask your question if you don't mind. I'd love you to come on off mute.
Sure. Hi, Louise.
Hi,
Nice to
Cindy.
meet you. Hi, Glenn. I'm in the process of trying to consider whether this program is the right one for me, which I'm really interested in. My question was more about, your consulting firm, so you're choosing those particular. Is there a framework that you particularly use? Because I know other large companies would use a potential framework to choose and select the SDGs that they're gonna measure themselves by or prioritize in their business. So I just want to know.
Yeah, that's a great question. We are not at the stage that we can be
Okay.
choosy with the SDGs. Oh, you want to give us you want to be our client? Sorry, you work in this SDG. We're not going to support you. We're very reactive when it comes to the SDGs. We're using the whole SDG,
Yeah,
all of the 17 goals as a framework.
right.
So we're not prioritizing any one specifically. We're kind of grouping them. So we have all of them in a framework like in Excel. That's what we are using for impact stuff. Very, very classy. And each of our clients have all of them, but then we work with the clients. I meet with each one of them to say, okay, in a discovery phase, we might not be ready yet. But if I know it's a health organization working on mental health, I kind of know as we're going through, it's probably these levers. But then we're discussing, once we're out of discovery phase, okay, I think we're going to be unlocking these. How do you feel about this? And get their agreement because they know their business more than we do. And it's important for them to feel like, yeah, actually, if we do X, Y, and Z and achieve these outcomes, then we believe we're going to be able to make more impact in these specific indicators. And all our job is to reflect that project and the outcomes that this will unlock in terms of impact. So it's not as prescriptive
Right.
as, yeah, not like.
Can I ask either of the professors that are here who
No, it
teach
looks
the
like
course?
Bauman's
Oh,
his hand up to speak.
Oh, I wanted to
I would
ask
love
him
to hear
something.
Cindy's follow-up though.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was asking Bauman about that. Fair enough. Go ahead.
No, my follow-up was more, I'm looking at more larger organizations who would decide on SDGs and writing their kind of huge ESG reports and a framework where a huge, like a chief impact officer in a bank per se, where they have about 30 people working in their team would select the SDGs and how they measure against them. Is that covered in the program? I guess I want to know, is there any type of measurement against SDGs or prioritizing or frameworks taught in the program? Sorry if it's a long-winded
You want to go
question.
first, Bauman?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is a great question, and I want to bring your attention back to something that Louise said at the very beginning, which in my opinion should be the starting point for anyone looking into getting into space from any perspective, large or small, which is the fact that many organizations don't have a theory of change. So I actually would disagree that organizations don't have a theory of change? I would say that they do have a theory of change. They just don't call it a theory of change. And it has a very, very narrow perspective, which is looking at how can we financially sustain an operation. Luis did actually mention that. Like a lot of things are measured in the corporate world, but they are measured in terms of like cash flow, all the sort of metrics for profit, for return. The way we sort of approach this concept of like this gap with businesses is that we say like corporate and Glenn, I think no, Luis actually referred to the fact that like businesses can think about like what are the impacts of what they do, and also what are like when I say what they do, the core operations. They could also talk about the impact of their charitable activities or community sort of interventions, etc. The way we approach this in the CPIA program is that we say like it doesn't matter what type of framework you use in order to communicate or measure or sort of account in terms of like tracking indicators, etc., and reporting them. You have to first have a good understanding of the definition of your impact, which is like defining that theory of change, identifying who is impacted by your operations and how. And that definition should be able to translate that definition into any impact measurement framework out there. You look at SDGs right now. SDGs are sort of a new version of MDGs, because every time you create one of these frameworks, you constantly need to update it. It's kind of like you can think of it like the latest version of the operating system on your mobile phone or your computer. Like those get updated all the time. What doesn't get changed, or what is important to understand, is what are you using this device for? And that's the part that in the CPIA program, we really try to empower the participants with that underlying understanding and capability to define impact and who is impacted by different types of activities, for-profit, charitable, public, etc. And then from there, you can say, okay, now I can, based on like my audience, my donors, my funders, people who I need to stay accountable to, I would pick this or that. And actually part of it could also be what's fashionable right now. Because everyone is trying to reach the same objective. And sometimes, even if you look at the impact genome or all these different frameworks, they constantly get updated, and you need to be able to speak to whatever version is live now. So that's the focus of the CPIA program, to sort of provide.
I want to interject. I want to say, yeah, that's the focus of a good chunk of the CPIA program, and all of the stuff about actually like how do we actually put a value on, or how do we actually basically put numbers on, or better quantify the theories of change and the impact is absolutely there. But I also want to add that part the third course in the CPIA program is really focused on trying to figure out what that impact is. So it's about measuring and finding the evidence that supports that impact. And a good chunk of this class, whether those that have taken it realize why that's there, is things like even qualitative analysis and how this helps, because we can go and we can measure the number of people that now have jobs, but that's forcing the impact into whatever it is we think that impact is, and not necessarily the true impact that the broader impacts that the program has. And so we spend a lot of time just discussing how to complement all of these other measures. We need to spend time talking to people. How do we spend time talking to people and figuring out what the impacts are that the people who are being affected by the program think they are, or the people working on the ground think they are, so that we can actually adapt the measures to be the things that are actually matter. One of the follow-ons to this, which I'm curious how Luis and the organization work, is when we're not doing this, we risk defining the impacts of the things that we as we hope they are, as opposed to how they really are. And sometimes we may end up cherry picking, in some sense, that the places that we know we're having positive impacts and ignoring the areas where maybe we're having negative impacts. So we might focus on clean water being returned to the environment without focusing on all the plastic pollution that we're causing in the process. Or we might focus on gender equality without focusing on the less than living wages that we're paying. And this is the really challenging thing to try to figure out how to incorporate. So I don't know if like class on Friday, I think one of the takeaways is that's challenging and we have to be aware of it, but there's no like clear solution. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Such an important question. So you remember the slide where it's like purpose-driven organizations and like your average kind of business. So the purpose-driven organizations, they already kind of speak in impact terms. They know what they want to measure because it's their baby. So if they're a clean tech organization, they want to be measuring clean tech and clean, environmental stuff. We worked with a food loss and waste organization. They want to be, we quantified the averted GHGs and alongside the health costs that were kind of saved. But we made sure that the emissions from all those trucks that were going around delivering all that food, they were kind of taken out of the metrics because a critical eye is so imperative. So we lead from the client side of things. But I just opened my framework because I'm like, oh my gosh, is there more for me to do in this realm? So thanks, Chris. I'm going to be taking another look at this. But you're right, there's no magic bullet. You just have to keep an eye on things and have integrity.
I want to make sure we get to Ben's question as well.
Mhm.
And Ben, I'm going to ask you to come off mute only because I want to hear your Irish tones. Ben's a student from the Accelerated MBA, but an important question as you think about the for-profit space. He works for Unilever. He's a senior
Right.
exec at Unilever, understanding the for-profit space and its impact on other measures like sales or external. But Ben, good to see you first of all. What's your question, mate?
Yeah, great to see you too. Hope still sound the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question, you pretty much got it, to be honest. I mean, a lot of my industry are interested in this insofar as does it better connect to consumers and as a result can it affect external measures like brand love scores if you were being a little softer in terms of your KPIs, or like really hard ones like can we see POS metrics from this, and or the hardest ones like shareholder value or anything like that. So yeah, I just wondered whether any research, Louise, in particular, the way you'd framed it up, I really liked it, had extended to some of the external metrics. I think productivity and turnover, obviously really interesting ones, but yeah, I just thought I'd take the opportunity to ask that question.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's interesting. So when you say external, really they're internal metrics, but like they're not really external in the way of you're talking to sales and point of sale.
Yes,
Like
sorry,
really
I
like
meant.
a question about attribution, maybe. Like
Yeah,
kind
exactly. Like in measuring these things and reporting improvements on them, in being members of things like B Corp,
yeah.
is there an attribution towards an improvement in how consumers would yeah associate with the brands
Yeah.
or yeah change their buying behavior?
Yeah, it's interesting for the just because I shared a little bit more about this particular company. One of the things we're doing right now is trying to prove, okay, what aspect of that 16% activity actually comes from, or say productivity because they're manufacturing, so they're measuring output
Sure.
and things. Comes from the human capital element and not a change in your inputs, a better quality product that you're inputting into your machines. But what aspect of that? So we're doing that actually right now. And it's from my past role in LEAP, I know that attribution has to be done very conservatively, and you need a lot of eyes. So for the SROI we built, everyone and their mother looked at all the calculations of that and how are we attributing and what kind of dead weight are we attributing to this to make sure that we're being ultra conservative with the number. So there, it's just embedded with assumptions. You know, you're assuming every way, every step of the way, you're assuming that one thing is leading to another. It's a theory. And so the more people that agree with that theory, the stronger it's going to be. But I have no research saying that X, plus Y equals Z for sure all the time, because these are a bit more nuanced, especially when you're talking about attribution of human capital or social impact according to sales. And how likely were you to buy this product had we not done that water project in the neighboring community? That's subjective, so it's very difficult. Oh, sorry, Professor Kashi has comment.
I just wanted to maybe help with the connecting the dots on that question. If I understood Ben's question correctly, Ben is interested in saying that some financial metrics are in the picture, and maybe the link between impact and financial metrics can be explored further. I think SROI as a framework, SROI is not trying to measure financial metrics. SROI is actually translating other impacts, monetizing them, quantifying them, monetizing them, and putting them into a form of a return on investment, but social return on investment. In the CPIA program, we basically discuss this type of analysis under economic analysis or social analysis. SROI is just a shortcut method created under cost-benefit frameworks where Luis mentioned the word dead weight. The dead weight is in the SROI sort of nomenclature is basically the way you define your counterfactual, which is like what would have happened in the absence of the intervention that you're looking at. But from a broader perspective, in the CPI sort of environment, we don't necessarily distinguish the financial impact from impact. We look at financial impact as one of the pathways for impact, which is basically the impact from the bottom line owners, investors, etc. would get. And we think of this all in an integrated framework. So in the CPI program, we look at impacts of an activity or an event, and we say these impacts can be through different pathways impacting different individuals. An operation of a business can make its investors richer. It can also make its consumers better off, or people in that community also better off. And these are all impacts of the same activity, and they should be looked at in the same framework rather than being totally separated. So the integration is a core part of CPIA, where we don't want to say financial should be a whole different thing and outside of impact analysis. We actually think of financial impacts also as impacts, and we believe that integration is critical if you want to better understand an activity, because it's the same theory of change at the end of the day. You're just broadening your perspective beyond the investors, and you're looking at all different perspectives in the society.
That's cool. Great. Ben, you're going to hear more about that when you join us in July. I'm delighted that you're part of the program. Warren, I know you've got to fly and you're in the program as well. Thank you to everybody. I really want to, Manny, your question isn't lost. I'll absolutely follow up with you. I know we didn't get to it. I apologize. Anybody else that's got questions, send them to me. I'm happy to see them, happy to pass them on, connect you with Louise. I want to say a big thanks to Louise for taking time out of her busy day, putting this together, sharing her background, her journey to the seat of CIO. And a big thank you to Bauman and Chris for weighing in on this as well, and the program. And all of those that joined us, truly, truly appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing all of you. And I'm happy to follow up. And again, it was a delight. Louise, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.